For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
To strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank the chair, and I thank the gentlelady from California on her opening comment with regard to accepting responsibility, and I think that's all that this side of the aisle has been ever asking for when it comes to the SEC, to accept the responsibility of their past poor performance in so many different ways. You know, when you think about it,
You see?
I did not yield, but I appreciate the gentleman's comment. So, in any other realm of life, personal life, business life, or whatever, when you have a failed business, what have you, when you have failed portions of that company, and they fail in their performance, is the response that, well, the solution to that problem is more people, more authority, and more money? Well, that seems to be only the case here in Washington, D.C., in our nation's capital, when you can have a failed entity like the SEC, where they failed in so many areas, where they failed in with respect to, as we've already discussed, in the with regard to Ponzi schemes, like the Madoff situation, the Stanford Ponzi scheme, where they failed in the area of operating a failed investment bank supervisory program as well, where there was a lack of supervision over in the money market fund, which led to, for the first time, I guess, in history, the breaking of the buck with the reserve primary money market fund account. They failed in all these areas. And what is Washington's response, or at least what is the response from the other side of the aisle? Let's give them more money. Now, the irony here is that they come to the gentleman from Massachusetts comes to the floor today to enhance their funding. But if I remember correctly, the Democrats controlled this House, what, from 2007 to 2010. They had all that time to go in and do a complete audit of these agencies. They had all those 4 years to look at them to see where they were making mistakes, how to fix them, improve them, and then increase their resources. But they failed to do that during the last 4 years, and now in this CR they say this is the time to do so. You know, the gentlelady talked about punishing the agencies. Well, they are punishing people. They're punishing the enforcement folks over at the GSAs. They're punishing the folks in enforcement over the IRS. And I would question the gentleman from Massachusetts before he put in this language. Did you contact any one of those agencies to see what the implications would be on those agencies for cutting to the extent that you are here? And I will yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you. Yes, I think it is unfortunate. Of course, our cuts are much smaller by multiples than the cuts inflicted by the subcommittee majority. And I hope by showing
well, the gentleman with this answer
the question. May I finish my answer?
Well, did you contact those agencies was my question.
I spoke to the people at the subcommittee who worked on them, and I think the cuts are too deep.
Well,
and I hope
reclaiming my time.
I apologize for taking reclaiming my answer.
It is a simple question to ask, that when you come to the floor with an amendment to say that we're going to take money and yank money out of one agency has a primary responsibility to the members of the public of this country to first go to those agencies and ask, well, what impact will they have? It's not a matter whether other amendments are coming down. They'll have larger or more de minimis impact. It's incumbent upon the gentleman from Massachusetts to do his research before he comes to the floor with his amendment. I'm sorry to see that he did not. Finally, as well, he comes to the floor with this amendment saying, well, we need to do this action now. Don't look back at their past poor performance. Let's take this action now. I remind the gentleman, who was the author of the Dodd-Frank reform legislation, that his very own legislation mandated a study. It was in Section 967 to reform the operation of the SEC, and it asked to do a study in that to see how their reform has occurred. Well, why don't we wait for the studies to come out, for the information to come out, to see whether or not the SEC has changed its performance? Look, even after they've lost their majority, we see the conduct of the SEC, and it still continues to fail. Look, even now we see that they are under investigation by the Inspector General. Why? For allegedly leasing more space before receiving funds to do so. So they've had a poor track record in the past. Unfortunately, in some areas today, I'm sorry to say, they still have a poor track record right now with regard to their finances, and who knows where they will be in the future. Now is not the time to say, let's just throw out more money to them. And when we talk about throwing out more money, I just harken back to a comment that the gentleman from Massachusetts made just earlier this week. We were looking at the actions of the SEC, and we were looking at the actions of the CFTC in a hearing just the other day. And whereas our side of the aisle, Republicans, were looking at this issue and saying, what can we do to honestly reform and make the rulemaking process and the rules that have come out more consistent and proper and be able to perform better in the regulatory climate, Their side of the aisle was doing the same thing this week as they are on the floor right now, saying the answer to everything is what? More money. He said it in committee. He's saying it on the floor right now. The answer to every single problem, I must tell the chair, and the American people know as well, is not paying more money for programs. It's making sure that those agencies perform correctly. And that's what this side of the aisle is all about. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time is expired.